I've clicked go live. Good evening and welcome to Success in the City. My name's Helen Webster. I'm with the lovely
Sandra Scott, and our guest today is the very knowledgeable and talented and influential Tony Lloyd, who is having a few technical issues. We've had a little go, but I'm hoping he's going to jump on any second now.
Yep. So at the moment he's in the green room, but we can't see a photograph of him, so we're going to wait and then we'll hopefully
We did have a brilliant photo of him because he stood still and he was looking in the sky like that, and it was hilarious, but we thought it was best to leave that off. So we're hoping he'll join us any second now. He's just trying a few. The best plans are mice and men.
Of course. How are you today?
I'm really good. You know, I've been running around. I've got loads of stuff going on, as you know, and so I've just been absolutely chock. I've just taught 4 hours back to back. So, no, 3 hours back to back, and had me dinner with Rona made, which was delicious. So, all good stuff, really. And I'm dog sitting from tomorrow for 5 days, which originally was sold to me as 3, then turned out to be 5. Tony has said he's in the green room waiting for you to let him in.
Right, I'm going to add him in, but I haven't got a photograph, all right? So we've got a blank screen of Tony, but we might hear him.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
you, but we can't see you.
We're going to keep you without the sound, without the vision, because it's better that we can hear you than not see you. Do you know what I mean?
Because I moved onto Chrome as the browser, wondering whether that might help instead of MSN.
Okay, so, and we're live on the air now. So that's okay. We just went ahead and did it. But if you appear, that would just be marvelous and we'd love it. But if we can't see you, that's okay. We'll do it like an audio show.
I think probably it says you're in the show. Everyone can hear you and see you.
Yeah.
But that's not true, is it?
It's the
we can hear you, so that's cool. We can hear you, so that's cool. So massive thank you. We know that you're super, super busy.
Yes.
And you've given your time today. So that's great. Thank you very, very much. So we do have a little format to the show, okay? So we shout out to the kids, any little people who've done amazing things. Sandra, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
No, you can go first.
Okay, I am going to give a massive shout out to Jacob Willis, and he's 10 years old, and he does a lot of fundraising for An Hour for Others. Yeah. And this week, he's done like Snowdon and he's done swimming and all sorts of things. But him and his dad cycled 25 miles from Southport and they finished at An Hour for Others hub, in Tubrook. So massive, massive shout out to Jacob. He does great things for them. And he fundraises for Christmas presents. Yeah, the money he wants is so that kids get prezzies at Christmas. So massive shout out there.
Brilliant. Well,
what about you, Stan?
So my shout out isn't, it's about success in the city, isn't it? But my shout out's an international shout out because I used to fly with a lovely girl called Alessandra Serrapa when it was at British Airways, and she lives in Italy in Puglia. And her daughter was on the national television last night singing. And this girl, we've watched her because she shares videos on Facebook, and the girl has got a beautiful voice and she's bilingual. She's been brought up bilingual. So her English is perfect when she sings, and she's just fantastic and a lovely girl. Hello, Peter. Peter Lloyd said, evening all. Peter, can you see Jesse? We can't see him, so I presume you can't.
Yeah.
So shout out to Alessandra's daughter.
Amazing. Big shout out. Tony, have you got any little people you want to shout out to?
We might have lost him completely. I can't see Tony. No, Peter, we can't hear him now neither. Okay, he might need to do this from his flat. Missed call 3 minutes ago.
Okay, so I am going to remove him from the show in the kindest way.
Okay.
Done. Okay. That's a shame because he's so so influential in the city and everything. We need him to be on properly, because his story's too good to not do it,
I've asked him to see if he can.
I'm gonna found him. He's come on. I think he's coming on his phone.
I am.
Hey, there we go.
So right.
There you go, look at that.
Just bear with me a second while we try and sort of position this in a way where I can actually see you all. Is that all right?
That's much better now. We can see you.
Perfect.
I'm so sorry. Technology is wonderful, isn't it, when it works?
It's okay, but you know, Tony, this show was started in the lockdown just to see the positives locally and for people to keep in touch. And it's a completely amateur show, as everyone knows. We don't get any money for doing it. It's all voluntary. So this is how we roll.
Okay, that's great.
So
that's great.
We've got a bit of professionalism in the room now. Tony's joined
yes,
you.
Do you think? Oh, and who would that be?
So Helen,
massive thank you, Tony, for joining us. We've done a little shout out to the kids. Do you have any little people that you want to shout out to?
To be honest, I'm trying to think now. I've got to be very careful because a lot of the young people I see, I work with in a professional capacity, and I'm not probably allowed to mention their names. So does that sound a bit strange? Best not.
Yeah, but we can shout out to all the young people who come to see you.
Well, indeed, yeah. All the young people we work with, I think we work with now, one-to-one. We provide therapy for, I think, about 1,400 children across Merseyside every year. So these are children with ADHD, autism, dyslexia, often the ones that can't get access to CAMS. Yeah, an awful lot of them out there, amazing, inspiring, future leaders, but perhaps not necessarily seen, understood, or nurtured in the right way, I think, in a lot of our schools. So yeah, I'm really kind of, I look at so many adults in industry now who are coming out as neurodiverse or neurodivergent, depending on which word you prefer to use, with over 30% of senior executives and entrepreneurs and self-employed people identifying as ADHD or dyslexia or both. So, you know, whenever I see young people, I just look at them and think, yeah, you might not be recognized for your capabilities right now, but all the evidence tells us that you're the future leaders, entrepreneurs, risk takers, artists, creatives, and kind of, you know, that always gives me a sense of encouragement when sometimes I'm looking at these young people and they're desperately trying to find their place and understand themselves and how they can achieve and thrive. So to all of them, seen and unseen, good evening.
Yeah, brilliant. Lovely shout out. I love that. Okay, so success this week for you personally, something cool that's happened to you. Do you want to go first, Sam?
No, you go first this week.
Okay, I've got two. Okay, so my first one is on Sunday. So the Big Help are doing a ballroom, the Big Help ballroom, and I'm involved, but I'm not dancing. Okay, so I'm involved with supporting. So I'm not dancing. Totally not dancing now.
Mysterious about that.
But I'm supporting Ashley, who is going to do the show dance, and it's going to be phenomenal. So I want to give a massive shout out to them because they were just fab on Sunday. And my other success was I met my Uncle Ron for a cup of tea yesterday in Waterstones. So it was gorgeous. We had a lovely little hour and a half catch up. So it was just lovely to see him, just the two of us having a little chat. So they're my two successes this week. What about you, Sam?
Okay, so I have got a success, but so all my life I had a list of jobs when I was a kid that I wanted to do, ranging from air stewardess to teach people to read. I had all these things. I've done every one of them, and there's one left. I have my own business, as you know, which I love, which is my absolute passion. But I'm thinking forward, and every 10 years, and it's only every 10 years, every decade, they do a course to be a blue badge tour guide of the city. And they want people specifically who speak languages as well. So I'm not ready to do that yet. But the course is now, and I'm 56 tomorrow. So the course is now, or it's when I'm 66. So that's that. We'll have to fit it in. So I applied and I found out on Thursday I'd been successful, which is very exciting. But I could, you know, it'll keep me busy in the summer as it is. So I thought, well, that's quite a cool thing to do because I'm very passionate about the city and I can speak to the people in their language if it's one of my languages. So I was really happy about that. But it takes, we start now and I won't be qualified till after January 2025. That's how long it takes to be a blue badge tour guide. Who knew? So there we go.
Boss, that's great news.
Congratulations, both of you.
Yeah.
What about you, Tony? What's your success this week?
Success this week. There's an event that happens each year in Liverpool. Used to be called the Vogue Ball, but it has a different name every year now. Run by a really talented guy called Darren Suarez, who's a dance and lecturer at LIPA. And I don't know if anybody's ever seen the BBC HBO television series called Pose, which is about young gay and trans people in New York in the kind of late 70s, early 80s, who they run away and they kind of were looked after by these what were called mothers in these rundown houses that would keep them off the streets and away from drugs. But their community revolved around what was basically called the dance hall on a Saturday night, where they would dress up in the most outrageous costumes and dance. And it was the one place in the world where they were accepted and felt safe and celebrated. We're not a charity that is able to donate. That's not kind of part of our constitution. But we know that a lot of the young sort of adults who perform in that event annually are neurodiverse. So, you know, young people with ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, etc., autism. And we were able to confirm that we were going to be supporting that this year, and that a few of us would be going along to the Wind Factory venue when it's on in October. And I've got to say, I don't think I've ever been anywhere where you get the same kind of raw and enthusiasm that you do on the Cop at Anfield, but you get it in the Wind Factory on the Dock Road when they have this annual ball. It's absolutely tremendous and really good fun. So yeah, it's kind of there are things that go on, I think, in this city that are just amazing, that so many of us don't know anything about. And I think particularly there's so much creative talent, isn't there, in this city, and so many incredibly talented artists. And it's just a great way to be involved in that, really. And as you can see, or when you might not notice, I'm beginning to go dark because the lights in my office are on an automatic timer. And there we go.
Oh,
So
hello.
You can have a little wiggle and then they'll come back on again.
Yeah, it was the same in the old office, yeah. You'd be sitting there.
But that's good, because that means he's environmentally friendly and he's looking after the planet. Okay. There you go. You're back in. Yeah. Fantastic.
How's
I want to say a massive thank you to Corporate Connections, because they sponsor the show. So massive thank you to them. So we tend to do Corporate Connections are like-minded businesses all meet together and support one another for their growth. We tend to do my first this or that is a little bit themed towards that, but it's also themed towards you, Tony, as well. Okay. So I'm going to ask you first, Tony. When you're doing a presentation, would you rather present to professionals or to the parents or, guardians?
I don't know that I have a preference, Helen. I think it's about, I think it's a privilege to be able to do my job the way I do. And I'm kind of, I try and tailor and adapt the language I use and how I present to suit the audience. I always think it's the responsibility of the person who's doing the communicating to make sure that they're understood. And for me, it's always about how can I come up with ever more interesting, creative, engaging ways to communicate what it is that I'm trying to say and meet whatever the objectives are of that presentation, but in a way that's enjoyable. Because I don't know about you, but I mean, I've been to a lot of conferences and a lot of training sessions, and it's like watching trees grow. They're just really not very exciting and much fun. And especially when, as we all did during the pandemic, we all had to move online. And I began to realize that how you present and come across online is really, it's quite different, isn't it? There's other things that you kind of need to do in order to convey what it is you're trying to communicate. But the high point of that for me was after the pandemic ended, and I think, Sandra, you might have been there, and we had our conference, which is a multidisciplinary conference for neurodiversity. So we have people from medicine, health, education, and also lots of entrepreneurs, business owners, senior executives of global brands. So about 500 all came together in Liverpool, in St George's Hall. And this guy bounds over to me and says, "Oh, Tony, it's great to see you. Great to finally meet you in the flesh. You're the only person I've seen who looks exactly like they do on Zoom." And I was thinking, there's a compliment. And he said, "Everybody else uses filters."
Yeah. Thank you for that, sir.
Yes.
I'm sure he meant it as a compliment.
Of course, he did. 100%.
You know, so, but yeah, I think, you know, when we're trying to communicate something to people, you know, and Sandra knows this as well, because we've done it together sometimes in the past, you know, and having fun, being engaging. Sometimes it's about understanding who your audience is, and you adapt it to make sure that it's meeting your audience's needs. So, it is about being adaptable, but also trying to understand who it is that you're trying to present to and why.
Definitely.
What about you, San? Would you rather present to professionals or to the parents?
I don't mind at all. Again, it's the same as Tony. I really don't mind at all. And I'm like Tony, I will just stand and talk to anyone about anything.
At a bus stop anywhere in the world, I know.
I have no problem with that at all. The only time I was nervous, Tony, was I remember you were like a keynote or a guest speaker at Nason Live, and you said, "I can't do this, Sandra." And I think I'd been there about 2 weeks, and you went, "Can you do this?" And I did the conference Nason Live, and I remember it was a seminar, but it was massive. There was like they said about 100 people there, and it was several hundred, and there were people sitting on the floor and standing up. And they had all the seminars when I walked in, and it had ADHD, Dr. Tony Lloyd, sold out, and they got me. And I was really happy they had a lectern there, and I was sort of like lent on it a little, and I was relaxed, and I did it, and the feedback was great. But that was the nerve-wracking one. After that, you know, I was all right apart from that. But of course, after you've done that, you can do anything. But, you know, you speak to Parliament and everything, don't you? But we'll find out a bit more about that in a minute.
We will. Go on, San, you do your this or that.
Yeah, we haven't got much time for them today, really. So I'll just do one quickly then. Okay, Tony, if you're going to network and meet other sort of people in the third sector and the other charities or businesses, would you rather just go to an event where you have drinks and things and just chat to people, or would you rather sit around the table in a more formal environment where everyone gets to speak?
I think a variety of all of that, to be honest. I'm not actually that good at just approaching strangers and starting a conversation, even now, you know, after, you know, and I've done a lot of public speaking, and I've kind of done a lot of interviews on television and things like that. I mask well. I do kind of get a bit anxious. So when it comes to any kind of networking event, I think I kind of prefer some structure whereby people are introduced and given an opportunity to kind of talk in small groups, as well as have the opportunity then to sort of mingle and pick people out who you particularly kind of want to have a few words with. But how do you know who it is to speak to unless you've got some idea of who they are, what they do? You know, we all have busy lives. Your time is precious, isn't it? And you want to optimize that. So the answer is a little bit of all of those things. I think the key thing is whoever opens the meeting sets the tone and the agenda, don't they, around, you know, relaxed, informal, a bit of humor, making people feel comfortable and safe. Because I think even in a business networking meeting, you know, sometimes you're making yourself vulnerable, aren't you? You're putting yourself out there and saying, this is what I do, or this is what we do. And you want other people to be interested, or at least value what you do. And if somebody's looking really bored and not the least bit interested in what you do, that can be quite disheartening. So I think, yeah, it's helpful to kind of have an understanding really of why you're there and the different people that are there. So a mixed measure of how it's done.
Cool. Okay. Dead quick. Okay, we're just going to do 2 each. Dead quick.
Right.
Messy desk or a tidy desk, Tony?
I can tell what Sandra's answer is going to be to that.
No, not now.
You know,
no.
I still am.
Yeah.
What are you, San?
I'm a massive tidy person now. But when I say that, it's because everything will go in a bag. It's not, I leave a tidy desk, but everything's in a bag. And I think a lot of that's come with hot desking and things like that, and working in different places and taking things with me. That's what's made the difference. I think if you've got a permanent fixture, I have everything clutter-free now, like my house, everything I like is clutter-free. So that's been quite good too. So what about you?
Messy, 100%. 100%.
Really
If it's tidy, it freaks me out. Yeah, it freaks me out. It sounds like we've got a little mouse with us, tapping away somewhere.
Tappity tap tap.
Okay, San, you're going to introduce Tony.
Okay, so I'm absolutely delighted. I've wanted Tony Lloyd on the show for ages. Is it me?
Is it you?
No, it's not me making a tapping sound.
Me. I haven't got nothing by.
So there we go. We're all right. Yes, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Tony Lloyd today. Dr. Tony Lloyd, I should say, who is the CEO of the ADHD Foundation, which he's taken from just being involved with governments to a national international organisation, presenting and everything, and lobbying Parliament, speaking internationally, all from Liverpool. Tony, we really want to hear all about your journey and how you've come to do what you do now, and what holds for the future.
Can we just, before you start, Tony, can you just explain very briefly what ADHD is, just for anyone who's listening who maybe doesn't understand?
And do we know what the count is?
ADHD affects 1 in 20 people. It's been around for as long as human beings have been around. Like dyslexia has been around for over 100,000 years. But by the way, the written word's only been around for about 7,000. So, you know, I differ in opinion in that when people refer to people with dyslexia or ADHD or autism or dyscalculia, that there's something wrong with them. I completely challenge that. I think these are all naturally occurring variations in human neurocognitive capability. I think there's an evolutionary reason why 1 in 5 human beings have one of these different minds, that in school we were all educated into thinking, well, they're the special needs kids and they're not very bright and they're over in a little porter cabin behind the sports hall, and they don't really achieve and they're naughty, and all those other nonsense stigmatizing stereotypes that we were all brought up with. And I've worked most of the past 20 years, really, I guess, trying to counter that and say,
oh, we're struggling.
Not one of them has the same brain. Your brain is as unique as your fingerprint. So for me, being an advocate of neurodiversity is about shining a light on all the amazing things that people with ADHD and dyslexia and autism can do, as opposed to defining them by all the things they can't do, which is what happens quite often in our schools and education system. And work a lot with businesses globally as well as nationally. It's there are lots of senior executives who are coming out now as dyslexic and ADHD. We know that about 70% of people who work in advertising and marketing have ADHD. We know that over 50% of people who work in construction have ADHD. We know that 40% of millionaires are dyslexic. We know that about 30% of entrepreneurs and business owners are either dyslexic or ADHD or both, because they frequently go together. We know that university graduates with ADHD twice as likely to start their own business. So there's this completely new perspective on people who think differently. And, you know, our kind of mantra is, don't ask me what's wrong with me, ask me what's strong with me, because actually there's a lot of things that I am exceptionally good at. There's a lot of things that I'm exceptionally bad at, of course. But yeah, it's really about understanding that in the same way that we accept and celebrate diversity of race, and diversity of sexual orientation. Why aren't we celebrating this diversity of mind? Because I think in the same way that biodiversity is integral to life on this planet, so is neurodiversity integral to life on this planet. So,
do you think that's about conformatism? I think it's about people don't like their society is a certain way. They don't like people who are a bit different, do they?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think researchers and academics have this thing called a standard distribution curve, don't they, Sandra, where in the middle you have the majority, and anybody who's on the edges of that standard distribution curve are somehow abnormal or disordered. And I challenge that completely. You know, if everybody's mind is different, if everybody's mind is as unique as their fingerprint, then you know, what constitutes the same? And I think you're right, Sandra. You know, there's been this cultural thing, hasn't there, where you have to be like us in order to belong here. You know, you have to be white, you have to be straight, you have to think like we do, learn like we do. And I know that we all like to be around people of like mind who have similar values and similar ideas and see the world that way, you know, the way we do. And that can be very affirming. But I think certainly in business and entrepreneurship, if everybody's thinking the same, all you ever get is more of the same.
100%. I was just going to say, neurodiverse minds, they're the inventors, aren't they? They're the marketeers, they're the artists, as you were saying.
Yep.
And I think they make society a lot richer and a lot
undoubtedly
more. Just like diversity, if you have an inclusive approach in everywhere, you get the best people, you get the best of everyone, not just the same type. No, absolutely. I think Janet's commented there.
Yeah, so Jan Railton, so she said when she became a Senko, she went on an ADHD course run by Tony, and it was amazing. Thank you for your knowledge. And Jan's a real advocate. Yeah, she's a cool. She's, you know, really invests massively. So how did the ADHD Foundation come about? How did you get there? And tell us all that.
Well, in its very, very beginnings, there was a social worker student called Sally Neal, who is now, I think, the HR director for a large corporate called Avco, who got a group of parents together and tried to get the education authority, as it was then, to do something to help these children. And it became the ADHD project, and it was part of the local authority. But the local authority wanted it to become an independent charity, so it became an independent charity in 2007, and that was the point really that I became involved as the chair of that charity. And it was fully funded by the local authority, but of course the economic crash happened the following year. The seconded staff from the city council all had to go. We had no staff, no money, and it was my job as the chair to wind it down and let the charity commission know that the charity was no longer operating. So I became the chair and was doing a day a week pro bono as part of my legal responsibility to close it down. And then the more I listened to parents and what they had to say, the more I listened to the young people. And of course, I knew I had ADHD myself. And I just thought, you know what, let's see what we can do. I think Sandra probably knows the rest of the story. It was like, well, I'll do a day a week, and a day a week became 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, often without pay for a number of years. But fortunately, I had a partner who earned a good salary, and nobody is more bewildered about how I'm still here, really. But yeah, I mean, I'm just turned 60. I'm succession planning. We've got an amazing team of people here.
Yes.
And we do a lot of good work. And if you think about the whole national conversation, you know, Helen, Sandra, and I'm sure everybody else listening, you know, 10 years ago, nobody was talking about neurodiversity. And when anybody talked about ADHD, autism, dyslexia, it was always negative. It was always about them being less than. And the conversation is very, very different now. And we celebrate neurodiversity in the same way that we celebrate LGBTQ pride and, you know, Black History Month and things like that. And I think it's long overdue. It's just about recognizing human potential and not making prejudicial or stigmatizing judgments about people because they're not like you.
Well, Tony, it's a testament to yourself, really, that you went through running this, being a chair of a charity that was about to wind up and close, to sort of sometimes, oh, there's Tony on the breakfast telly in the morning when I'm having a cup of tea, and frequently, though, you are one of the leading authorities now, recognised nationally, aren't you? And you're invited. I know you go to conference and you speak at events abroad as well, and in Italy and Germany, and you partnered with universities, etc., and done a lot with higher education institutions, etc. So how did you go from sort of not winding it up to sort of becoming, certainly in your field, a household name?
Dogged determination, perseverance.
Yeah.
A lot of self-doubt, to be honest, Sandra, because there was, for many years, it was like, I was thinking, is this ever going to happen? Am I being naive? How are we ever going to change anything? And then I kind of had this epiphany, around about the time that we were working together, and thinking, actually, do you know what we need to do? If we're ever going to win this, we've got to win this argument in the course of public opinion. We've got to change the culture. And then from that epiphany, I went into a state of shock and thinking, oh no, this is too big a deal. We can't do this. But then I don't know, synchronicity, met a lot of really inspiring people that just encouraged me to carry on. And it's, where we are now as an organization is wonderful for the city. But I think there's a lot of people out there and a lot of organizations. And I always said, remember I told you, Sandra, the story about I was asked along to an awards event for entrepreneurs and SMEs. And I was thinking, why the hell am I here? And it was in Leeds. And then they called my name out for third sector. And I was thinking, what? Because all these other people were getting up, talking about how they'd increased exports, how they'd opened offices in the States and in Europe. And I thought, I just don't know why I'm here and why my name's being called out. But when I got up and he said, have you got anything to say? And I just said, well, only this. I said, we all were brought up to believe that children with so-called special educational needs are stupid and not very bright and naughty. And I said, and it's nonsense. I said, I know that there is a lot of creative, entrepreneurial, successful people who are responsible for setting up businesses and taking those risks and creating opportunities. And I'm pretty sure that if the research I've read, that means that at least 1/5 or a quarter of the people in this dining hall of 500 people, that at least 1/5 of you have either ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, dyscalculia. And this roar went up and everybody started clapping. And then after that, it was like watching Spartacus. Everybody came for awards, said, oh, and by the way, I've got dyslexia, or by the way, I've got ADHD, and by the way, I was excluded from school, or by the way, I left school with nothing, and now I kind of, run this really successful business. And it was just a moment, where you just think, this is it. It's just, I think its time has come.
And you have overcome some difficult times. I remember going to work. So for people who haven't worked or got onto this week, I used to work for Tony at the ADHD Foundation. I was so I used to work with Tony. It's just out Sandra and I used to run. I used to work with Tony at the ADHD Foundation as the Senko and business development as well, engaged in the private sector. And I remember one time I went to work and there was a person stood outside campaigning and handing out leaflets against us. And I was like, what is going on? And it, just like really strange things happen like that. And people have got very fixed ideas about things. Or they'd say, oh, I would never give my child medication, or I would medicate my child. And, it can be quite polarizing, can't it? People have very strong opinions about it, even if they don't, or, in my day, that didn't exist. You hear a lot of stuff like this, which is quite challenging. If, like myself, you have ADHD, it is quite difficult to deal with, isn't it? Because we're trying to be positive and help people, help young people in particular, to grow up and have fruitful lives and manage things. And it can be quite challenging. You said about dogged determination. It can be very challenging to keep going when you've got opposition like that at times, especially historically. it's a bit more positive now.
Yeah,
You know,
and I think there's that myth, isn't there, that ADHD was about naughty boys, and that medication for ADHD was some kind of morality pill. I'm pretty sure that if it was a morality pill, the government had been putting it in the water supply years ago. It's not that at all. And living successfully with ADHD, yeah, there are some people who take medication. I take medication for my ADHD. But it's not the be all and end all. That doesn't change who you are. It doesn't change your values, how you treat people, your attitude, or your history. I think, often we're disabled by the context that we're in, aren't we? And I think in an information technology driven economy and culture, a lot of learning differences like dyslexia, ADHD, dyscalculia, tech overcomes them. And it's interesting, Sandra, because I, again, remember a conversation with you. There are so many neurodiverse people who are working in tech.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, they call Silicon Valley in California, don't they? Nerd Valley, which is not particularly kind. But I think, again, it tells the story, doesn't it, that these are the creatives who are driving innovation. And if you think about the kind of jobs that exist now, they're completely different from what they were when we left school. Nobody used computers. Having a great memory was really important then. Not anymore. We've all got smartphones. Mine's got 248 gig on it. The computer that launched the first Apollo mission to the moon had 8 megabytes of processing power. That's how much technology has changed the way we live. Yeah.
Cool. So the ADHD Foundation, we had Lisa Rudge on, the lovely Lisa, who spoke about Tourette's, and she's, comes under the umbrella. And we're going to talk about umbrellas. So I'd like you to explain to everybody how the Umbrella Project came, because it's a fascinating thing for people in the city, but also it's not just in Liverpool now, is it?
No, it's happening in Gaithersburg in the States in October, Manhattan, and I've been invited out to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia in November because they're going to have one there, and I think there's going to be one in Australia next year, and we've had some international schools, different parts of the world doing it, but yeah, it's become this phenomenal celebration. There's a global billboard advertising company called Clear Channel, and they now use that umbrella motif and tell all the marketing agencies for all these big global brands that your adverts have got to be neurodiversity friendly. So you've got to use fonts that people with dyslexia can read. But how it all came about was we had a group of young people who were our youth board, and they were trying to think of a name for themselves, and they said, we've decided on the Alphabet Kids. And I said, why? And they said, because we've got lots of letters after our name, like you. And I went, what, like what? And they were, ADHD, LD, ASD, and one little lad called Marcus piped up with honours. Made me laugh. And I can say, well, you do know, don't you, that D word? I said, you can forget that. You're not disordered. There's nothing wrong with you. You just think differently. It's a myth that you've got low IQ or low ability. And you know what? It's who you are as a person that counts, not how many O levels or GCSEs or degrees you've got. These are just an umbrella term for people whose minds process information in a different way. Different doesn't mean less than. So really, they're just an umbrella term. And they said, okay, well, we'll be the umbrella gang. And I was thinking, right, okay. So then they produced these educational comics for the kids that were all about what it was like to be a special needs kid. And they talked about bullying and teacher attitudes and how they then, had this umbrella room where it was a safe place for these kids to go during lunchtime so they didn't have to deal with the bullies on the playground. And then it became an umbrella canopy art installation, which first appeared on Church Street in the city centre on Church Alley, in front of the Blue Coat. And now it's in 10 cities in the UK every year. And there's about 1,000 small businesses and schools have a small umbrella installation, and they all celebrate neurodiversity every year between sort of in the UK it's usually from the end of March through to the end of August, but obviously in different parts of the world where they have different seasons to us. They have a slightly different time of year. So yeah, out of the mouths of babes, what this little group of young people kind of inspired has now become this really well-known symbol. So if anybody Googles the Umbrella Project or the ADHD Foundation Umbrella Project or Neurodiversity Umbrella Project, what I can tell you is that last year it got over 4 billion media impressions.
Wow.
And that has an advertising value of over 90 million.
I remember you saying to me this idea about these umbrellas and saying, you know, I want to make that happen. And I was like, right, okay. And then, you know, I moved on, as you know, I've company, but I'm looking at it now, so I'm always really impressed and happy with it all.
Yeah, it's amazing when you walk down and you go, you know, where the blue coat chambers in the alley, and you see all the umbrellas above you. It is absolutely unbelievable. It's
well, we didn't have it. We didn't have it in Liverpool this year because they did put some lights up in Church Alley. So it didn't happen in Liverpool this time around. But Liverpool University have a semi-permanent display near the Student Union. And Hope University and Liverpool John Moores University have their own neurodiversity umbrella project. So, you know, and there were a lot of schools. There's a lot of schools in Liverpool that take part. And that's really, you know, it's not just about, you know, what a lovely kind of thing to look at that makes people smile. But really it's about its social impact, because people then are asking questions. What does this mean?
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's a thing. It's like a place where people take selfies, though. So many on Facebook. There's a lot of people have the photos taken because it's a really nice image that way. You know, it's really cool. And I saw the thing about it being in one of the universities as well today, and places abroad. So I think it's wonderful, and it's just constantly raising awareness. So what happens in our so say someone thinks, oh, my child might have ADHD, and you know, I know you do other screenings now for dyslexia and Ehlers syndrome as well, don't you? Mm-hmm. How do they get in touch with you guys nowadays? What happens?
Well, I mean, people have to kind of apply through the website, and we can't. There's a lot of what we do isn't free at point of use because it's not funded by anybody. So they can purchase it at cost, but we know that that's also beyond a lot of people's means, and it concerns me and worries me that you know, a lot of what we do, which should be available to everybody, in my view. Sorry, I'm just making sure I'm plugged in. Should be able to get this. Usually, you get assessed for learning differences in schools, but our current government put a stop to that back in 2012. And I think it's really unfair on teachers, because teachers are being held to account for raising levels of academic attainment and progress, but they're not allowed to use screening tools like the Do-It Profiler, for example, to identify what the child's cognitive profile is so that they can adapt the teaching and learning for that child to achieve. I think historically there was always that thing about, oh, well, if you don't learn the way we teach, you don't belong here. And we've seen a lot of this, you know, nonsense, zero tolerance stuff where, you know, you kind of, where some people think it's really big that children are turned into automatons and things like that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not against having a strong behaviour policy. But in my mind, I think, you know, evolution didn't design children to be sat behind desks for 7 hours a day. No. Our brains don't reach full maturity till our mid-20s, but throughout childhood, you're being asked to concentrate and focus for several hours a day. And I was beaten regularly in primary school for fidgeting by some teacher who thought he was being big because he was a disciplinarian. And in secondary school, I was constantly told off for not doing well in exams because I was being lazy and not trying hard enough, because I was, you know, I had a very high IQ, but my exam results never reflected it. But because I wasn't naughty, and because I was generally a nice kid, and because I was a bright kid, it was like, oh, you can't possibly have ADHD, because there's that stereotype, you know. And if you think about some of the words that we used to use to describe people who had physical disabilities, like invalid, you know, what a horrible way to describe people. Or some of the words that were used to describe people of colour, or some of the words that were used to describe people who were LGBTQ. And you just think, you know, why? Because you're not like us.
Yeah.
Comes back to that thing. So I think now what we're seeing is parents are much more informed and much more savvy at advocating for their children, so that their children's needs are better understood and met. But actually, what we want to try and do is move that conversation away from this deficit lens and like stop talking about what your children can't do. Talk about what they can do.
Yeah, play to
And
the strengths.
yeah, and I think as well, in the greater scheme of things, Sandra, I think that, you know, there's been a bit of a backlash lately from industry saying, well, what does a graduate degree tell us? It might tell us that somebody's got some intellectual competence in a particular curriculum subject. It doesn't tell us about their attitude, their work ethic, their passion, their ability to, you know, communicate with other people. It doesn't really tell us a great deal, does it? It's almost like the focus is on intellectual development. And I think education should be about preparing young human beings, A, to be lifelong learners, to make a successful transition to adulthood, to be economically independent and employable and good citizens. And I don't think that the best way to measure that is by simply looking at GCSEs or A-level results. And I feel sorry for teachers. I think they're under phenomenal pressure to get certain grades, but they're not given the tools to do it because, well, also because I think, you know, our Ofsted framework says, well, this is how we're going to measure it. So if you don't show that you're achieving with this particular measurement, we're going to say you're underachieving or you're low ability. Well, that's like saying to somebody, you know, who's about to run a 100-meter race and they're 5 foot tall and the person next to you is 7 foot tall, they're going to get there quicker than you just because they've got a body that will. So it's the context, isn't it, often that kind of defines people's abilities. And I think accessing, really parents should be asking schools to screen their children, and where necessary to make a referral. It isn't always about going to a doctor to get a medical assessment, you know, because you can't treat autism. And people often talk about, well, what causes autism? What causes ADHD? Like it's something that you should cure. Well, actually, like being gay, you know, you can't cure it. It's a naturally occurring difference in human beings. And we help and enable people to learn the way they learn, not knock square pegs into round holes, and with the best of intentions ends up doing harm to very young human beings. Young people learn by example.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We've got loads of comments, haven't we, Hal?
I was just going to say there's a few. So Tara Garbutt's listening. She says, does this offer advice and ideas for teens who may have ADHD? And that was a while back, so I'm not really sure.
So there's a free guide. There's a free guide on the website for, you know, living successfully with ADHD for teenagers, and it's got like all kinds of information about how you might know whether you've got ADHD, but also how to manage it successfully and how to deal with learning and homework and things like that.
Brilliant. And then she says, this is really interesting. And for her, it's having the tools to help her child move forward in a happy, positive way, which is what we're all about.
Absolutely.
And Kenny Lawler says, hello, Tony. Hello, Helen. Hello, Sandra. Hello, Kenny, to you.
Hello, Kenny.
So if people have had referrals and you know, everything, and we spoke about medication, and there's lots of different coping strategies and all sorts of things of education, isn't there, you know, around people, you know, medication suits some people, it doesn't suit others. You know, I think you said before, you know, you pop a tablet and, you know, it doesn't just, you know, put this on you, you know, and you're going to become an amazing human being or whatever. So there's lots and lots of it. It's a massive scope. So we'll share the ADHD Foundation's website details and people can have a little look, and there's lots of advice and guides and things like that on the site. So that's cool.
Absolutely.
So moving forward, Tony, very quickly, what's the future of the ADHD Foundation?
And the future of Tony?
And the future of Tony?
Well, I think after a lot of resistance, because we get asked to open up all over the country.
Yeah.
But really, that's often about people saying, oh, come and source everything else here for us, and you find the money to deal with it so we don't have to. We do a lot of work behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see. We do a lot of meeting with MPs and government departments, trying to influence policy, because a lot of the services that we offer, we can't offer nationally, but we're trying to help everybody across the UK. So there's a lot of unseen work. We are opening a base in Wales and Scotland in the next couple of years. And we're doing more and more work with industry, because actually that's where all the exciting conversations are happening. I think within health and in education, it's very difficult to change anything. It's very difficult to innovate at the moment for a whole range of reasons. And I think, you know, certainly post-COVID, a lot of people are quite exhausted, and the third sector carried a lot of families when the public sector services weren't accessible during COVID. So, you know, big shout out to a lot of the third sector organisations who took the strain of that. But I think for us as an organisation, I think it is about, you know, building on success and working collaboratively with, you know, all business sectors, nationally, internationally. There's a bigger picture here. It's not just about doing for, is it? It's about enabling. Somehow, if we can change public attitudes, I know that government policy and public services become what the court of public opinion want them to be. And that's why we need better understanding, and people need to realise that actually people with ADHD and autistic people and dyslexic people, particularly when they were children, had a pretty shitty deal, and that's not fair. And also it's a waste of talent, and we need that talent. We all know someone. 1 in 5 people are neurodiverse. We all know somebody who is a friend, a colleague. We need to kind of, I think, be more visible and get that message out there. So that's kind of more of the same of what we're going to do, I think. And as for me, I don't know. I still I don't think my body realizes that I'm as old as I am, or my brain certainly doesn't realize that my body can't keep up anymore. Obviously this argument, Sandra and I used to laugh about, being hyperactive. There's nothing wrong with being hyperactive when you're in business. Everybody likes somebody who's got loads of energy and drive. It's only in schools that nobody likes it. Yeah. Being, mind wandering and not able to concentrate, actually, we're very creative. We can hyperfocus, we can concentrate, but we think in a different way. And it's about, finding the ways that work for you. And being impulsive, well, they're the strokes of genius. It's those moments of, impulsive, lightning kind of insight. And I always use the argument, Leonardo da Vinci, who was one of the greatest inventors and scientists and artists, who had ADHD and dyslexia, or Einstein, who was autistic, Thomas Edison, who apparently was dyslexic, Eleanor Roosevelt, who helped found the United Nations, who was dyslexic, Steven Spielberg, dyslexic, Stephen Fry, ADHD, all these amazing people. And in history, Mozart, you think they would have probably been excluded from our schools now, wouldn't they?
100%. Well, Thomas Edison wasn't he? Thomas Edison was sent a letter saying we can't do anything.
So Jan Railton, Jan Railton needs to say we need to concentrate fully on support, and as you say, not try to cure neurodiversities, but embrace the differences around us. And Jane, is it Cordes?
Jane
Cordes.
Hello, Jane.
So she says, outstanding work and led by one of the most passionate humans I know. Such insight into various sectors. Could listen to Tony all night. So I want to say a massive thank you for Tony for giving us time. We've just got a tiny little bit left. Shout out to any grown-ups who've been amazing this week. So I'm going to shout out to the cast of 42nd Street on the Liverpool Empire. I got to see it twice because I bought it for my mum and she wasn't here. So Sandra came
on Monday.
So I took my mum again on Thursday night. And
poor Phil, along.
Absolutely unbelievable. So massive shout out to anyone who performs in the theatre. They're so passionate, they're so talented, and they're just, they're just amazing humans who can do loads of stuff. So big shout out to them. What about you, San?
I'm going to give a shout out to a lovely lady called Sue. And Sue's an older lady who's a teacher and still works and is really a patient person and is very experienced at working with young people in the care sector and with challenging behaviour as well. And I do a little bit of some consultancy work for a school. And she sat with me today and had a lovely calm meeting and was quite insightful and gave me some good advice about things, which I found really helpful. So thanks to Sue.
Brilliant. What about you, Tony? Which grown-ups are you going to shout out to?
Do you know what? There's so many, unsung, unseen heroes out there doing amazing things for their children, as parents, for their colleagues, for their friends. But my shout out today is really got to be for one of my colleagues, Emma. And she's awesome. She's amazing. And sometimes just doesn't know how amazing she is. So big shout out for her.
Oh, I love that. Love that. Big shout out to Emma. Have you got a red face moment, Sam?
What's one of those?
So slightly embarrassing, something we can laugh along with. So mine was, it's Sandra's birthday tomorrow, as we all know. So I was dead organised last week and ordered a birthday present, and I was dead made up with myself. And when I checked my email, it doesn't arrive till the 21st of September. So she'll have to wait.
I'm having a low-key birthday this year. I've engineered it that way. Yeah. Tony, you must well have a good red face to share.
Yeah, I spent most of today until 3 o'clock thinking it was Wednesday.
Yeah. That's
Seriously, and then wondering why I was getting to. You've got an appointment in 5 minutes, and thinking, just I don't know how it happened.
Sorry, have you seen what Penny's just put on here?
Yeah. Carol and Lola got robbed by a seagull last week.
Oh no! Do you know what? They're getting brave, aren't they? They dive bomb you now and
steal a Subway sandwich, a seagull in our city. What about yourself? Was that it?
That was my red face. Yeah, have you got one?
I've normally got a brilliant one, and I haven't got one this week, which means I'll have a beaut next week. We can virtually.
Although me and Uncle Ron were roaring laughing yesterday of Jace Porter's. So Jace went into the post office, didn't he? And she said he put the parcel on. She said, "Hi, how's it going?" And he went, "Oh, it's great, thanks." She goes, "How are you?" And she goes, "No, is it going first or second class?" And I think it should be massively in a script somewhere in a show. We were just roaring off that. What book podcast are you listening to, San?
I've just been listening to the Diary of the CEO, as I always listen to, but I had another one that was really good and I meant to make a note of it. Oh yeah, you sent it to me, the How to Ikigai.
Oh, How to Ikigai, amazing.
Yeah, that's what I'm on to, chapter 3. That was very good. I listened to that the other day like that.
We need to teach everybody, every little person in school how to Ikigai.
That's about playing to your strengths, massively.
Oh, right, okay. I was going to say, I don't know what that is, but...
It's your purpose in life. What are you good at?
Send it to you now.
What do you love doing? What do you love doing? What are you good at? How you can help others by doing it, and then how can you be rewarded for it? They're your 4 Ikigais, and you'll find out what your passion and what your purpose in life is. And especially for people who are a bit you'll absolutely nail it. It's unbelievable. Yeah,
I've just sent it to you now, Tony.
Brilliant. Are you reading anything, Tony? Have you got time to read or listen to anything?
I'm good at starting books. I'll be honest. It depends how busy. Every time I really read something from start to finish in a couple of days when I'm on holiday. But right now I'm actually reading something called The Song of the Cell. It's a bit sciencey, which is not kind of. I don't really read a lot of books like that, but it's just this amazing kind of well-written thing that just tells you just how phenomenal the human cell is and what it does and how adaptable it is and how we've become the most adaptable and successful species on the planet. Probably not the most intelligent given the mess that we're making of it at the minute, but yeah, really one of those books you think you wouldn't like, and then you think, wow, this is really compelling. So yeah, a bit different for me. I can read everything from airport thrillers to distract myself to I did used to read a lot of books on neuroscience until my husband said I was a nerd.
I am. Everyone calls me a nerd. I'm used to it, don't we? My red face is when Tony said Song of the Cell. I visualize people singing soul music in a prison cell, not the adaptability of the human cell. So there we go.
Perfect.
Well, do you know what? If it works, whatever way it works for you.
Amazing. I love that. So I'm listening to Lessons Will Be Learned, and it's a book about transforming safeguarding in education, and it's written by 2 ex-police officers who were high up, and they dealt with it. But it's about safeguarding in education and how, if we do preventative stuff, rather than if we're proactive rather than reactive, and it's very, very interesting stuff. So that's how. So yeah, there you go. What's your closing quote? What's your mantra, Tony, that we live by?
The only thing anybody ever remembers you for is whether you were kind, not how rich you were, how many titles you had, what your job was. People remember whether you were a decent human being, and that's probably about the only measure that counts.
Absolutely.
Well, massive thank you for giving your time. We've had lots of comments. Thank you to everybody for listening. I'm sure we'll get lots more listens. We will share the ADHD Foundation's details on our page, so that people can contact and find out more. Yeah. So massive thank you, and we will see you. Jane's given some hearts. Kenny's given a little namaste and some hearts. So we will see everybody next week.
Great. Cheers, everybody.